Hey, welcome to the show, everyone. I am your host, Arthur Gatton, and this is the Last Call podcast. So today I have the privilege, and I'm really excited about this because all you know that I'm a traditional whiskey drinker and a little bit of a bourbon nerd and other spirits. But one of the worlds that I don't really get to delve into is Scotch. So today I'm here with Travis Tidwell of Ardbeg Scotch Whisky. How are you doing, Travis?
I'm doing well. Thanks. How are you, Arthur?
Good, man. Good. I'm excited. Big shout out to Laura for helping us get together on this. So looking forward to getting to know more about you. So for the listeners at home, tell us about yourself, what you do and what you do for Ardbeg.
Yeah. So I am currently the national ambassador for Ardbeg, covering all 50 states in the United States. Been in the role for about a year now as the national ambassador, but previous to this, I was the Western U.S. brand ambassador for both Glenmorangie and Ardbeg for about 9 years. So definitely been working on the brands for quite a while. Huge Scotch whiskey fan and a lover of both Glenmorangie and Ardbeg. But specifically, I've always had the first love of Ardbeg being my all-time favorite single malt. So very thrilled and couldn't be more excited to get out there and share the wonderful whiskey with everybody.
Awesome, man. And so you told me a little bit about yourself before you got into Ardbeg. What led you into this path? Because it's a unique pathway for you as I'm looking over your resume.
Yeah, so I kind of got started when I was in culinary school. I was taking some elective classes, that were involved in beverage management, menu classes, wine specifically related classes. And I've started noticing flavors and aromas in the wines that I was kind of experiencing while I was going through culinary school. So I started, experimenting with a little bit of wine, tasting wine, but I quickly realized as a broke college student that I couldn't afford a nice bottle of wine every week or so. So I went to a local retail store here in Southern California called High Times Wine Cellar. Pretty popular. Everybody kind of knows it as the local family owned wine and spirit shop. So bought a bottle of a single malt there on a whim because I like the packaging of it, and it had two glasses in that gift pack, about 20 something years ago. So I mainly bought it because of the glasses, because I was a broke college student and I didn't really have any nice glassware in my apartment. And then I started tasting some of the aromas and flavors in that Scotch whiskey that I was tasting in the wine classes. And for me, that was kind of like this is really cool. I want to kind of explore this more. And then from that point on, I just was trying as many Scotch whiskeys as I could, as many whiskeys as possible. I had a great bar manager who would let me taste one spirit on the back bar every night as I closed, because I was a bar back while I was in culinary school. So he would let me taste, something on the back bar every night. And eventually I always gravitated towards that Scotch whiskey kind of whiskey palette. And I just realized quickly that there was such a depth of flavors within the Scotch whiskey category that I just kind of explored and started reading, studying, tasting, and collecting as much of it as I could.
Yeah. For those at home who aren't watching on video, but can see, yeah, you really fell in deep. I'm very jealous. I'm not jealous of most collections, but that looks like a good one.
Yeah, that's the funny part is it's only part of it.
Oh, Travis, isn't it? If you're trying to, relieve yourself. But yeah. I feel like culinary almost leans very close to those. I have a lot of friends. We have chefs, James Beard award-winning chefs have been on the show, and they've almost always spoke about how that translates specifically to spirits as well, that skill set and just that appreciation for it. So it felt like a natural passion for you.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to be a chef, but then I kind of got a job working in the front of the house as a bar back and eventually bartender. And that's really where I kind of fell in love with the front of house, as well as, the back of house I love, but it's really hard grinding work, like you're working in very, very hot kitchens, you're working brutal hours. And I kind of fell in love with like talking to people and introducing people to new flavors, new cocktails, new ingredients. So I started incorporating my culinary school in making cocktails and things like that. So it was kind of a natural progression for me to just jump into the front of the house side of the business. And I honestly have the perfect job because representing a single malt like Ardbeg, we like to experiment with different things, and we can create, food dishes utilizing some Ardbeg and kind of local fresh seafood, and just implementing that into the day and day of what I do.
Mhm.
So, and I'm still out there in restaurants talking to chefs, talking to, bartenders, servers, and engaging with consumers in like a culinary setting, which is like for me the perfect kind of mix of everything all coming together.
Sounds like an amazing job. Get to do something you really love and share that with a lot of people. So,
Yeah.
So tell us more about Ardbeg, and for those who some of our listeners might not be familiar with Scotch, what makes it different and unique from American bourbons and whiskeys and all that? Travis froze on my end.
You kind of work your way up to, and I feel like Ardbeg is definitely the end of the journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
As far as progression, when you talk about like the progression of flavors and the richness of Ardbeg single malt.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm always stunned and surprised when I meet people out in different states and different markets who aren't huge like whiskey Scotch collectors, or they haven't tried too many, and they just immediately go and say, Ardbeg's my favorite. I fell in love with it, and it's one of the first whiskeys I ever tried, but I absolutely love it because it's so different. And I think for me, that's such a cool part. Ardbeg on its own is really a unique little distillery, located on a small island that doesn't like to do things kind of like the same as everybody else. We do things a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of translates when we're out talking to guests as well and talking to different consumers. They are diehard fans for this stuff, which I think is quite amazing. It's cool to be like, it's cool and fun to be different and be able to not take ourselves too serious, and to create fun, unique expressions that kind of are rooted in the island itself, but also experimenting with different cast types that we get, and things like that. High gravity mashings, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. So it's quite fun, working for a distillery that is well known, but it's not super super well known that we can still do things a bit different and kind of experiment here and there.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those bottles that come out with very unique kind of techniques and everything else. And I actually really love the labels too, because I think it kind of gives a very fun appeal to it for those who have never tried it. It gives you something different that you might not try somewhere else. When we talk about peat and that flavor note, which is known for being surprisingly fruity, zesty, and not just smoke. I think very often when you think about Scotch, people think about heavy, just a smoke bomb, and it's not always the most appealing when you hear about it. But Ardbeg as a Scotch is one of those that I feel very approachable and have those unique flavors. They were talking about earlier about there's the high gravity techniques. Can you tell us a little bit about those unique things that make it different?
Yeah. So I guess the biggest thing with Ardbeg, I didn't really answer your previous question now that I think about it, but
okay.
one of the unique things about Ardbeg is we often refer to ourselves as the peaty paradox, because Ardbeg produces a heavily, peated whiskey, but because the shape and size of our stills, the copper pot stills that we distill and make the whiskey in, they're quite large and they get a lot of copper contact because of the purifier. We actually produce a lot of reflux, which in the end product translates into a lighter, more fruity and more delicate style spirit. So it's kind of this balance of what we refer to as soot and fruit. So Ardbeg has this sootiness, this kind of pine tar resin, but underneath all that smoke, you get a lot of these fruity tropical kind of characteristics that are developed because of our long fermentation times. And then also the extra copper contact that we get with the additional reflux and the purifier. We're kind of creating these minute differences that happen over time, but they all add up in the final product. And that gives us more of this lighter, more delicate and fruity, but heavy smoky whiskey. So it's like the perfect paradox, right? You got this very tropical fruity characteristic, but you also have this heavily peated, kind of sooty, ashy, kind of pine tar characteristic that works really, really well with the two together. It's like sweet barbecue, right? Or something like that. So I reference that a lot with Ardbeg and some of the things we do. But Ardbeg works surprisingly well, having those kind of two polarizing characteristics, but they come together and meet in the middle very, very well.
So I know that this is just for some listeners who aren't familiar, what is peat? Because that term gets thrown around a lot. And for those average consumers who might not know and trying to be introduced to it, go ahead. I'll let you explain.
Yeah. So peat is basically the natural resource that we use on Islay specifically, or, in the Outer Hebrides or the islands of Scotland. When people started immigrating over to these islands, they quickly realized that they needed some sort of natural resource to heat their homes, cook their food, dry their clothes. And at the same time, they were making whiskey or making spirit. So they found that they could dig up this earth, this peat, the peat moss, and let it dry out for a couple months. And then they would use that as their heat source, their fossil fuel. And at the same time, that was imparting flavor into the drying process of malting the barley, or into the drying process of the barley after it had been malted. And that gives us kind of this rich, smoky kind of flavors that come from the soil. So peat is essentially earth that you dig up. We like to use in between like the 3 to 6 feet deep of the peat, and because that part of the peat has the most vegetation, most kind of organic composition in it, that's what gives it some of the flavor to the final product. So we dig that up, dry it out, and use that as a heat source to kind of flavor the malt, if you will. On the opposite side of that, for a whiskey from maybe the Highlands or Speyside, you can just heat up the room during the drying process of the barley, and that will impart very neutral flavors, and it won't give you that smokiness. But that's what these island distilleries are typically known for, is that rich kind of peated characteristic, which is coming from the island soil composition from that peat. And the peat can vary based on where it's dug up and dried. And that's why for us, Islay peat, it's very close to the sea. It's very close to the ocean. So you kind of get this slight maritime or sea influence that you find in some of these whiskeys. But it's really down to the composition of what's in that soil. So over the last 1,000 years, the soil will compress, and some of the natural organic matter that was found in that soil will become part of that peat layer.
Thank you. I funny enough is when looking up and just reviewing and kind of looking at videos, because your brand, Ardbeg's a very popular brand, and it's almost a cult following. I've seen, even when I just Googled to kind of show my fiance what the bottle looked like, because I told her we were doing this show, videos came up. And the first thing when talking about tasting this is like, I could even smell like sea air in this bottle, which I found was amazing. I mean, considering where it's being created and based off of. Now that we kind of touched on you having this giant cult following and there's those unique labels and all these fun expressions, do you find yourself teaching people about the brand, or just managing this kind of excitement when fans see who you are and, oh my God, and they're excited to share a story? How's that going?
It's been amazing. I would say it's kind of like, you never know what you're going to get into, to be honest, when you meet an Ardbeg fan. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a first time consumer coming to the event for the first time. And then there'll be times where I meet people who know more about the brand than me. And I like to think that I know a fair bit about it, but, I'm always surprised because, as you mentioned, it has this really deep cult following kind of status. I've met people along my journeys that have big Ardbeg tattoos on their arm, things like that. So it's kind of wild and kind of crazy to see the diverse reaction that you get from people. So I would say it's a mix of the two. Sometimes I'm engaging and creating extra excitement around like events like Ardbeg Day. Typically people that come to the Ardbeg Day events are very, very knowledgeable about the brands, and they're kind of diehard fans. And then sometimes when we host, spirited dinners, or I'm working out with our distributor partners, I'll run into, bar managers and people who know a little bit about the brand, but they've never really experienced it too much. But once people kind of look into it and see what Ardbeg's all about, it's hard not to love it, to be honest. It really is. I think we make some of the greatest whiskeys out there. We've got tons of awards for a lot of our expressions and for our distillery itself. And we do like to experiment and create some fun, unique whiskeys, which I think is always exciting.
Yeah, I mean, you recently took home Scotch Producer of the Year at 2025 IWSC. And this is pretty awesome, considering that at some point the distillery was mothballed back in the day. I mean, that's part of the history and all that. And to see such a recent high award, does that feel like pressure to keep innovative or to just keep doing what's going well? Like, how does that impact what the brand is doing?
I think we've kind of always just done what we do and produce, quality whiskeys, high quality whiskeys. We have a great distillery team. We have great people working on the island, producing these high quality whiskeys. We have a wonderful master distiller who oversees both of our facilities and ensures that we're producing the highest quality whiskeys we can. So I think it's kind of just continuing on what we're doing, but also experimenting and creating these fun little limited editions or, experiments of what would happen if we, mature this spirit in this type of unique wine cask, or what would happen if we tweak the fermentation, because of this, so it's kind of maintaining what we've always done, producing high quality spirit, but also, innovating and creating some fun one-offs here and there.
Awesome. Perfect segue. Because speaking of that, you released a bottle called the Smoky Verse in 2025. It was released. Most headline as Ardbeg Smoky Verse, a committee release. It uses high gravity mashing. You touched on it. Do you mind expanding on that for anyone who was wondering this whole time about what that looks like?
Yeah, high gravity mashing is it's a really kind of geeky brewing term that's often used in making, beer production, or the guys at the distillery, when they measure the soluble sugars or the amount of sugar in the barley mash, which is what the way they measure it is in the form of gravity, right? So gravity is essentially the amount of sugar to the water ratio and where that sits on the gravity scale. So for this particular expression, what we wanted to do was create a much more concentrated mash. And the way to do that is by doing what we call a high gravity mashing. So essentially, we're malting in more barley to the same amount of first and second waters. And what that gives us is a higher concentration of sugar, or soluble sugars, that we'll be able to extract in the form of, maltose and maltotriose and dextrin, which will then essentially become, your fermentable base to make, your brewer's beer, if you will, or your wash. So the way they measure that is in the form of gravity. Kind of a geeky term, but essentially what it means is basically more sugar to water ratio, and how that sits in the final. There's a lot of scientific calculations that you can do based on the gravity to determine your final volume as well for fermentable sugars, your wash, and then your final distillate as well. So all kind of crazy, but essentially what we did is we mashed in like 1.5 times more barley to our same amount of first and second waters that you use to extract the sugary liquid, which will go on to fermentation. So what that does in the whiskey itself is it gives us more esters. So esters are what translate into your fruity, tropical kind of characteristics in the final product. So the more esters, the more funky and more fruity it would be, which is kind of cool and exciting. So if you open up a bottle of Smoky Verse, you'll notice that it's really quite tropical on the nose. So it has these like wonderful tropical kind of funky fruits on the notes. It reminds me almost like some of these really, really high ester rums that you get from Jamaica and things like that.
Oh, okay. I went to verify. Like, did I get a Smoky Verse? No, I did not. But I will look for one. So I talked about it, but the Ardbeg Committee, what is that?
So the way the Ardbeg Committee kind of started was when the distillery reopened its doors in 1997. We were looking for a way to reward our loyal followers who had supported the distillery from the 70s through the dark times of the 80s, and then with the reopen of the distillery in 1997. And we had a little bit of whiskey stock left over from the closure. So barrels from the 70s, a little bit of distillate from the 80s that had been maturing and sitting in the warehouses, even though the distillery was closed. There was also a little bit of distilling happening in the late 80s, early 90s to fulfill contracts that we had with other major blending houses. So there was a tiny bit of distillation happening behind the scenes. And mainly that was from a sister distillery that also owned Ardbeg at the time. They would come over and make whiskey at Ardbeg for about 2 months out of the year, and then they would go on back to their distillery just down the road and continue full-time production at the distillery they were working at. So there was a little bit of whiskey stocks available. And when we reopened the distillery, we had to kind of get creative and see what we could do with the whiskeys that we had in the aging warehouses. But we also recognized quite quickly that we didn't have any young whiskey to be able to create a consistent core product like an Ardbeg 10-year-old, which is our flagship. We didn't have any whiskey to release as a 10-year-old. So one of the first whiskeys that came out from Ardbeg was a series of whiskeys showing how it was maturing up, and that was called the PD Path of Maturity. It was a 6-year-old whiskey called Very Young, an 8-year-old whiskey called Still Young, a 9-year-old whiskey called Almost There, and then a 10-year-old cask strength called Renaissance. But then one of the main core whiskeys we released was Ardbeg's 17-year-old. And that was kind of one of the first whiskeys. And that was what we considered like a committee edition. So basically the committee was inviting these local and loyalists of Ardbeg and the brand of Ardbeg to support the distillery through these times that we were maturing our whiskeys up. And we would give them the first right of the special releases we released from the older stock, but also the newer stock. And that's kind of how the Ardbeg committee was created. So it was created in the year 2000, and it was to support the distillery financially, but also to kind of slowly build the Ardbeg brand again with some of these really quirky one-offs that we released over the years. And that's kind of what we try to stay true with the tradition of, our committee editions or our committee releases throughout the years. We'll release these kind of quirky whiskeys in ode to the original committee releases that we did, that were, casks that we had that were just kind of like one-offs that we couldn't really find a core product that it would fit, right?
And the committee itself is what, 100, it says, with over 180,000 members?
Yeah, it's growing. We've got 180,000, but it's ever growing, which is great. And that's why we have some of these crazy parties that we throw. If you've seen videos of the Fesh Ila or the Islay Festival at the distillery, you'll see all walks of life come out to the distillery and kind of share their love and passion of Ardbeg. And most of them are committee members. Yeah.
Listen, I have camera will travel. You let me know.
For sure.
What does someone have to do to become a member of the committee or part of the
It's quite easy now. All you have to do is just sign up on ardbeg.com and you'll get a couple emails a year kind of letting you know what's happening at the distillery, some updates when we've got some new special releases coming. If we're ever releasing or throwing a party in a certain state or a certain market, you'll get information to that event or activation. We also have a national tour that's about to kick off in February, which it'll let you know the dates and locations of where that tour will be going, called the You Can't Untaste It tour. So, or the You Can't Untaste It campaign, which will be happening in February, which could be, it's going to be quite fun. I'll be at a lot of the stops and interacting with different guests and committee members rather. So yeah.
That sounds like a lot of fun, traveling around and doing all that. So, all right. So I'll make sure in the show notes, and for listeners at home, if they're interested, to make sure that they sign up at ardbeg.com, because I'm gonna, for sure.
Yeah, it's fun. Ardbeg is one of those brands that, it likes to be quirky and fun. And the emails that you get, you only get a couple of them. It's not like a spam email that, some companies do.
Those are the worst.
Four emails a day. But this one, you get an email every couple of months, and it's usually a fun read. And I always kind of chuckle and laugh at some of the things that they write. So it is quite fun.
I'm curious. All right, so I'll sign up tonight for sure. All right. So I have a couple of follow-up questions. So we talked about the near death of the distillery. It was mostly closed between 1980s and 1990s, specifically around 81 to 89, and then ran sporadically around 90 until 96. It was bought. I'll let you explain it. So what saved the distillery and what went from there?
Yeah. So Dr. Bill Lumsden, our director of distillation, head of whiskey creation and whiskey stocks for the Glenmorangie Company, is really the pioneer and was at the helm of kind of resurrecting and bringing Ardbeg back to life. So we were part of the MacDonald and Muir family, or the Glenmorangie Company, and they heard through the grapevine, if you will, that Ardbeg was up for sale. And we were able to secure and purchase the distillery because Dr. Bill, with his love and the dedication that he had put towards Glenmorangie, the original owners of Ardbeg, quickly realized that Dr. Bill would be the right person to turn over the reins of Ardbeg and bring it back to its former glory. So we were able to secure and purchase Ardbeg because of Dr. Bill's expertise in wood maturation, in the love and care that he put into Glenmorangie, and the company was more than thrilled to sell it to the Glenmorangie Company. We actually weren't even the highest bidders for the distillery. We were the second highest. The first highest was a group of private investors who wanted to secure and buy the distillery, but because of the great pedigree that Dr. Bill has with Glenmorangie and how the owners wanted to see Ardbeg return as a proper single malt and produce high quality whiskeys and spirit. Yes. So that's why
someone who was going to keep the tradition alive.
Yep, exactly.
That's awesome. I'm glad that happened. And I hadn't realized, I know that it was impacted obviously through prohibition and everything like that throughout time, but it's such an interesting history to it all too. And it's beautiful to see that the bottles kept that traditional look. It's looked the same. It's kind of just stayed historic, right? You recognize it right off the bat. Even I referenced it earlier when I showed my fiance the bottle. She's like, "Oh, I've seen it all the time," because she used to work at Total Wine. She just hadn't realized the name. So definitely, I'm glad that turned that way. With that being said and talked about, you touched on you said unique bottles, right? And some fun stuff. So there was a bottle, and I have it behind me, so I'm going to try to get it. It's the Wee Beast.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the interesting things that I found on this is Wee Beast, a 5-year-old, recently won best overall Scotch at New York World Spirits Competition.
Yeah.
Tell me about Wee Beast, because I have not had this, admittingly, never had this. I'm about to open this now and have it with you, but tell me about how that felt. And, proving age is nothing but a number, especially in terms of whiskeys with this giant demand for, I want something super aged and 108 years old. And talk to us about this.
Yeah. So, 5-year-old whiskey, some of the original blends and original whiskeys that were released were never quite super aged. That's relatively a newish thing in, I would say, the last like 15, 20 years, where you started seeing older and older age statement whiskeys. And then we ran into kind of this weird period where aged whiskeys really sold really, really well. And in certain markets, they sold exponentially well. And some distilleries actually wiped out a lot of their older stock because of that. For us at Ardbeg, we kind of had the opposite problem, where we actually didn't have a lot of really old whiskeys at the distillery. We were quite constrained in the younger whiskeys because we reopened the doors in 1997, 1998. So we had to kind of get creative. And one of the ideas that we've always kind of kicked around is young peated whiskeys kind of show their best with the phenolic compounds, and the smokiness in the whiskey kind of show better at younger ages. As a whiskey matures and gets older, the smoke and the phenols will slowly decline and fall off over the over the course of its maturation. So with a whiskey like Wee Beastie, you're really embracing that young kind of spunky feistiness that you'll find in the whiskey, where it has some of these rich, heavy, smoky aromas that may fall off in some of the older expressions of Ardbeg. So I think it's a great place to kind of explore and jump into young peated whiskeys if you like that, big, smoky, robust kind of characteristic and flavor. Which I think, a lot of consumers are becoming more and more accustomed to kind of smoked products, smoked whiskey, the rise in barbecue across the country. You have another category of spirits called mezcal that's making smoky ingredients and smoky flavors a lot more popular. I can't go to a restaurant now without seeing a mezcal cocktail on a menu. So it's really making it much, much more easier to have these conversations about, smoky ingredients or smoky whiskeys, smoky spirits in general, which I think is quite awesome. So yeah, we're definitely blessed and fortunate to have Wee Beastie, and it's been showing really, really well and winning a ton of awards, double gold medals across the board under 10-year-old single malt whiskeys. So it's really cool to see the amount of accolades that Wee Beastie is acquiring throughout the years. We launched it about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's been one of those whiskeys that's just really surprised me every time. I've been working on the brands for 10 years now. And when I first started, we didn't have Wee Beastie. So I've always been partial and biased to the 10-year-old because that was my first introduction into, Ardbeg. And it's the one I drank the most of. I still drink the most of 10-year-old. But Wee Beastie is one of those whiskeys that's every time I taste it, it surprises me how good it is and the high quality of the whiskey for 5 years old.
I'm excited. I will pour this up soon. I found the name to be interesting, and when I looked up the accolades, it did stand out. For those that know, I recently did a whole conversation with an Armagnac brand called Ode. We talk about the most aged bottle, one of the oldest spirits. But it opened this conversation for some of my viewers was, does something being older necessarily mean that it's better? I was like, I was always a big advocate of it. Doesn't necessarily. You could find a good product that's a 10-year, 5-year, 4-year blends. A good product's a good product regardless of age statement. So I was happy to see that a 5-year-old bottle won the award.
Yeah. And for us, when you start out with a really, really high quality base distillate or base spirit and you age it for 5 years, it's going to turn out probably pretty good if you have a good quality or a high quality ingredient to start with, so. Yeah,
quality matters all throughout. Outside of Wee Beastie, were there any other special runs or specific unique blends that stood out to you that you're like, this is something definitely someone has to check out?
Yeah. So I just hosted a whiskey event for some friends and a group of consumers with a whiskey club here in Southern California, this last Saturday. And I brought one of my all-time favorite kind of limited releases that we've done. And that is a whiskey called Ardbeg Ardbog. So it was kind of a play on, the peat bogs and some of the things we would find in the peat bogs. And we kind of created a limited edition around that. And we actually changed the lettering of the brand and got in a little bit of trouble with TTB and all that good stuff. But
a little bit of trouble's fine.
Yeah, it just means if you're not pushing the boundaries, you're not experimenting, or if you get in trouble, if you get in a little bit of trouble, that means you're on to something, right? You're innovating, you're pushing the boundaries a little bit. And I think that's what Ardbeg is really good at as far as, for whiskey making and things. Yeah. So Ardbog was one of my all-time favorites. So I brought that along for the tasting, and everybody seems to love that. That was a whiskey that was fully matured in Manzanilla sherry, which is a very specific style of sherry from Spain, which is like a saltier style because it's from a village in Jerez that happens to be really close to the ocean. So that's one I typically really love. But some of the newer ones like Smoky was really, really impressive to me because you get such a high amount of tropical kind of aromas and characteristics because of that high gravity mashing. But we will have a very, very, very exciting committee release coming out this March that
Go
I'm
on.
super, super, super excited about.
My
So
birthday is February 28th, so we could do a little. Go on, tell us about that
yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah. So that'll be coming in March. So make sure you sign up to be a committee member because that's where you'll hear about it first before everybody else. So
All right. So you guys heard it here. Make sure that you sign up to get first dibs. I had this in real time. This is delicious. I almost stopped talking to you completely, Travis. This is actually, it's really good. Cheers.
yeah,
And I see you pouring it
no
on. Like the aroma's clean. The color, it's nice on the palate. It's not, for anyone at home that's worried about overly smoky, it's not overwhelming. It's delicious. It's smooth. And I pride myself in being honest about things. If it was bad, I'd just be like, hey, so they just move on. No, this is actually, go ahead. You were going to say?
Oh, I'm. I don't know if I mentioned it, but Ardbeg is also one of those distilleries that we don't add any coloring to any of the whiskeys, and it's all non-chill filtered. So kind of what you see in the glass is what you get, and the color for me is a reflection of the two casks that we mature the spirit in. Mm-hmm. So this is a combination of ex-bourbon casks and Oloroso sherry casks. So a little bit of that color is coming from the sherry influence. And that's also toning down some of the heavy kind of phenols and characteristics that maybe you were expecting, but they're a little bit softer because you get some of the sherried kind of notes in here as well.
Yeah, that's perfectly described. Pretty terrible about all the description stuff, but yes, I can tell you that this is delicious for all of my friends listening at home. This is, and you're right, the color comes. I didn't expect it to be this light. This light. Yeah, the color and everything. I was like, this is good. Really good.
See, for me, I actually think this is quite dark for a 5-year-old. When you think of it, because it's not your standard, American bourbon, right?
That's why.
Bourbon, you're using that new charred oak every single time you make bourbon whiskey. Mm-hmm. For us in Scotch whiskey, we don't actually use a ton of virgin oak. Mm-hmm. We like to use more of the first fill, second fill, refill bourbon casks because our base spirit or our base ingredient being malted barley is a much, much softer, more delicate grain than corn or rye, which you would use in a bourbon. So those raw grains can hold up really, really well to new oak, where us using malted barley, it's a little bit softer. So we like to temper the whiskey a little bit more with not so heavy oak driven flavors.
That's probably, you hit it on the head. That's probably why I was, as a bourbon drinker, I'm always expecting something darker and more amber. This is lighter, and I actually really like it. I'm mad I didn't open this earlier because I could have been drinking the whole time.
I mean, it's fine. So like when we look at this one, the 5-year-old, the wee Beastie, when you pour the 10-year-old and compare the colors, the 10 is double the age, but you'll notice it's a little bit lighter in color.
Okay.
And that's because there's no sherry influence on the 10-year-old. The 10 is all ex-bourbon cask, but it's also a little bit different recipes that we use for the casks to bring up some of the heavier phenols and some of the more smoky characteristics. By utilizing a more second or third fill cask, you're going to get more of the spirit characteristics and less of the oak-driven flavors. So that's really Dr. Bill, our whiskey maker's kind of job, is to balance the base spirit with the oak and kind of find the perfect marriage of different barrels to make a consistent, 10-year-old product.
That's super unique. I'm going to compare them in a moment, but I'm running out of space. So talking also, you when you spoke about also not using fresh oak barrels, I think there's a little bit of there. I also appreciate that there's sustainability there, right? So you're not having to create more, destroy more trees, take down more trees, do all this. You're using what you have, and I know that in 2025, you also announced there was a major partnership with Royal Society of Protection of Birds as well. It seems like sustainability is almost imprinted in traditions and keeping things alive. And sustainability is really embedded in your culture. Can you tell us about that partnership and what that brought up? Is that just kind of happenstance or?
Yeah, I mean, for us at both distilleries, we're always trying to, we're always trying to, give back to the local community, but also sustainability is a huge point of interest for us as a company, as well as the distillery. We're located on an island with only 3,000 people that live there. So it's very crucial that everything we do on the island is very tactical. We don't want to disturb the microclimates and, what is so precious of that island. We want to preserve all of that. So doing these partnerships and securing restoration of like the peat and everything is really important to the DNA of our distillery, but also to the company as a whole. Both of our facilities are going to be 100% natural gas. We have biodigesters. We're doing all the things to make the distilleries more sustainable on the front end as well as on the back end. So it's really crucial to what we do as a whole.
Not negatively impacting your community and the people that they appreciate. I'm certain. Ardbeg, with a small island with 3,000 residents, I did find wild because that's such a small populace compared to where I live. So
yeah,
but it must feel good too for them too to have something they could be very proud of and be a part of. I kind of want to talk a little bit more about this is a fun one. Ardbeg recently opened a hotel.
We did. Yeah.
Tell us about that and where is it located? I don't know enough.
Yeah. So I haven't been yet. So I haven't been to the new Ardbeg house or the new Ardbeg hotel. I have stayed at that hotel prior to us renovating it and kind of creating the new experience there. But it's located in the heart of Port Ellen, which is, just the town right down the road. And it's probably maybe 10, 15 minutes away from the distillery, which is great. So it's located right in Port Ellen. And it's a thriving part of the community. There's different hotels on the island, but there's not too many. So the Islay Hotel, now the Ardbeg House, is really kind of an institution on Islay, where, I've drank at that bar many times. I've tried a lot of different great single malts at the bar. I can't wait to go and experience the actual hotel and see how they've updated and renovated and created a unique experience with kind of the fun flair of Ardbeg. But I know that they're offering some very special drams at the Ardbeg House that are exclusive to the Ardbeg House. So okay. I'm super curious. I want to get out there and check it out as soon as possible. I've seen some photos and videos of the food and the culinary experience there. It looks incredible. And I know that they're going to offer, some of the rarest and finest single malts from Ardbeg, but also, other fine distilleries on the island's products as well, because, that's what Islay is all about. It's a community. So it's more or less bringing everybody together, and hopefully we can continue to provide for the locals of the area, and they can go in and enjoy some great bites and some great food, as well as some awesome cocktails and some fine single malts as well.
I as a consumer, I find that so appealing to have kind of a one-stop shop for a vacation, a visit. You get to visit a small, beautiful island, go to a distillery, go to a hotel themed around the distillery. If you're a lover of anything Scotch, that could be a hell of an experience. It's a bucket list type of trip for sure.
So I always tell people who have never had a peated whiskey before, or people who don't enjoy peated whiskeys, I guarantee if you go to Islay and you spend a little bit of time there with the locals and go see the environment, see the island, the people, you'll fall in love with it. Truly. It's such a magical experience. I grew up in a super small town, but there's something really special about going to an island with only 3,000 people. There's about 10,000 sheep, and there's not a single stoplight on the whole island.
10,000 sheep?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's truly a magical place. It really is. And I've been very fortunate to have gone quite a few times. And every time I go, it's magical. Some of the best seafood in the world. It's truly an incredible place.
That sounds beautiful. And now I have a business expense card. That's fine. I'll figure it out. So now that I've had the 10 and the 5, 10 is a little bit richer and deeper. But that 5 in the color, that's why when you saw me like this, I was like, okay, this is a deeper. So
this is
color.
the Beastie.
Really?
This is the younger one.
That's why it's weird. That's why it's, but I know that it says 5 years and it tastes smooth as heck too. The wee Beastie. I think I'm partial to the Wee Beastie right now versus the 10.
Yeah. I'm partial to the 10, but I think that goes down to just being on the brands for 10 years and you know, I will say this, and this is true. Ardbeg was the very first whiskey that made me fall in love with peated whiskeys. And at the time I worked for a competitor. So this is a true testament. Like, that's why I left that job when I saw that the Glenmorangie and Ardbeg brand ambassador position had opened up. I couldn't have been more thrilled to jump over and represent these fine whiskeys.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. I think the Wee Beastie is going to be part of my rotation if I can find it more often. It's good. It's actually really good.
Yeah, the Wee Beastie is amazing.
Yeah.
You know, it packs a punch being 47.4%, but it drinks super, super smooth.
Yeah. I was looking at the specs on it on my show notes. I was like, this does not taste like it should be this strong, but okay. All right. So definitely one of the ones that we'll keep on rotation and check out for all the listeners at home. Make sure that you check it out because it's really, really damn good. It's approachable. It's not over like a smoke bomb. It doesn't overpower and it comes off very, very smooth. The sensor, I hate to use all these terms, those caramel notes and all those kind of like smooth feels. I don't know. Enough of that. But definitely worth checking out. I know we're getting close to the end, but I do want to check, kind of get you to share some of these unique things that Ardbeg does do when you come from a marketing trends. We talked about the unique blends, the unique bottles. You have sent whiskey to space, comics, sci-fi themes. Tell us about what goes into deciding where to go with that. And is there someone, just a comic book nerd that's sitting somewhere with labelers? Tell us about what process it takes to come up with these unique ideas in marketing.
Yeah, so I think the whiskey in space one is super cool. And that was a natural partnership because the company that's really responsible for shipping and receiving on the ISS, or the International Space Station, the two main guys from a company called NanoRacks just happened to be huge Ardbeg fans. So they approached us. Yeah. They approached us because Dr. Bill Lumsden, our whiskey maker, is a PhD in biochemistry. So he has a natural science background, and they approached him to want to do like a true science experiment in space to see the results of what would happen with a peated whiskey maturing in zero gravity. So but Dr. Bill and his team worked with NanoRacks to kind of design an experiment where we could see what would happen if there was a whiskey matured on the ISS with zero gravity. So sure enough, we sent up vials of new make spirit and charred wood shavings in like an internal capsule that had a controlled mechanism that would separate and allow the spirit to interact with the wood shavings at the same time. And it was up there for about 3 years. When it came down from space, Dr. Bill wrote a full white paper on it and kind of giving his analysis on the effects of zero gravity maturation in peated whiskey, which I thought was really cool and really interesting. So that was one of them. And then, like the comic book, and we created this whole world around what we call Planet Ardbeg, and kind of thinking of if Ardbeg was a specific style of comic, or what would it be? And it was kind of like this out of this world experience where we create these really big, robust, and unique flavors. So it kind of naturally aligned to create a graphic novel or something with Planet Ardbeg. So like the flavors of the whiskeys we're making are kind of out of this world and extra dimensional. So that's where kind of the inspiration came for Planet Ardbeg. And then working with, graphic artists like Trad Moore, who create special labels. I happen to have one of the really cool series that we did for like some special label Ardbegs. So this is a Trad Moore specific label that we designed for the series of Court of Reckon, which I think is pretty cool and pretty interesting to do fun things with that. So Trad Moore is one of the graphic artists who's worked on a lot of Marvel and DC comic stuff. So pretty well acclaimed in his industry. But we do a lot of fun partnerships and do some cool things along the way. Ardbeg is one of those brands that just likes to, not take itself too serious, but still creates really, really high quality whiskeys and spirits. So yeah, it's quite fun.
It's awesome to hear, because you are right. There are too many brands who are too serious about what they're doing. Meanwhile, their spirits are supposed to have fun, right? Create memories and do something unique, and it's supposed to be fun. Drinking spirits and enjoying this with friends and family is supposed to be enjoyable and unique and different, not just the same things that you see like on bougie spaces. But that's for another day.
Yeah, it's not, it's supposed to be fun. And that's what I always encourage when I'm doing a tasting. And whiskey for me is about creating memories with like-minded individuals who share another passion for the same thing that I'm representing. And when you get everybody together and to share stories and open up special bottles that they accumulated or found in specific markets or states, to me, that's where the magic happens. And I always try and encourage, whiskey's great and it's meant to be shared and enjoyed with friends and family. So that's what I always try and encourage. It looks great on a shelf, but it's meant to be drank and enjoyed with friends, to kind of create those memories. Agreed. Otherwise, it's just whiskey in a bottle on a shelf.
Agreed. We joke. One of our main mantras in the show is that no good story started with salad. But part of what we like to do and talk about is like the memories that are associated with these spirits, but sitting around a table. It's not about anything other than just remembering and kind of putting like a placeholder or a pin in a memory and an experience. Being able to share that with someone means a lot. So definitely love the fact that your brand is not taking itself so serious where you feel like, oh my God, I have to save this for like my daughter's christening or something. I can enjoy this with a good friend to remember this story forever. So love to hear it. Two last questions before we close out. One, if you had to give someone an introductory bottle and say, hey, try this Training Wheels, what would be that bottle that you would recommend?
For me, I really enjoy Ardbeg 10-year-old. That's probably my all-time favorite. Okay. So I introduce people to that a lot. Uh-huh. And you can do it a couple different ways. So if I'm out at a bar or restaurant, and somebody's never had Ardbeg 10, I always recommend two cocktails: an Ardbeg Old Fashioned. So it's a smoky old fashioned, but you don't have to take a smoking gun and kind of physically infuse the whiskey with the smoke. So it's kind of like a cleaner smoked old fashioned, because Ardbeg 10-year-old for me has this really vibrant smoke, but it's also quite a clean peated whiskey. So it finishes really clean. And then also an Ardbeg daiquiri. So if you've never had an Ardbeg daiquiri, it's the perfect balance of lime, sugar, and peated whiskey. And it really, really works together. So if you know of a cocktail bar or a bar that makes a really, really good daiquiri with like fresh squeezed lime juice, simple syrup, and rum, but we substitute the rum out for Ardbeg 10-year-old, and it makes an incredible daiquiri. Okay. So it's a much softer approach to Ardbeg. I also really, really like our new Ardbeg 17-year-old, which is a more lightly peated Ardbeg. So it's a bit different. It was a special release or a committee release that we did last year, but I love that whiskey because it's a little bit softer, a little bit more approachable. But if you have somebody that just wants to jump headfirst into the deep end, then Beastie, I think, is a great example. It's not going to break the bank. It's a pretty approachable price point, and it's a whiskey that packs a ton of flavor. Where, maybe a couple, like 5-6 years ago, when people weren't as familiar with smoky products or smoky whiskeys, I would have maybe said something else. But with Beastie, I think it's like the perfect marriage of like a big, robust, full flavored kind of characteristic in a whiskey, but it's not overly smoky or too intense. So for me, I like the Beastie because it has some of those sherried kind of rich, oaky, spicy notes that maybe you're familiar with in a bourbon. So I think that's a great one to introduce to maybe like bourbon drinkers into a peated whiskey.
Awesome. Thank you. And I will also concur. I agree. The Beastie is dope. I love it. It's fantastic so far. I've poured it 3 other times. So if you start hearing me act funny at the end, it's natural. And last but not least, just for fun, if you were on a desert island and you had to take one spirit bottle with you and it wasn't Ardbeg, what would it be?
So not whiskey related?
It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
Whatever you want to answer.
I happen to really like wine as well. So one of my favorite wines is Sancerre,
Okay.
which is it's a Sauvignon Blanc made in the Loire Valley of France.
Okay.
So I think that, and to me, like Sancerre, I could drink it all times, anytime.
Mhm.
I think it's one of those wines you could just drink whenever, or champagne. Champagne's another one that I can drink pretty much all times, any times. But if we're talking spirits, I do really enjoy tequila as well. So typically I gravitate and if I'm drinking an aged product, I like whiskey. If I'm drinking something not aged, then I'll drink. I really like sipping on Blanco tequila.
Oh, okay.
So
I thought that you would have leaned mezcal.
Well, I used to really like mezcal. But over time, when I want to drink a smoky product, I'll just drink Ardbeg because we make it so well, and we do some pretty amazing expressions that I really happen to love. So as you can tell behind me, there's a lot of Ardbeg back there,
and the green chartreuses. And man,
I do like chartreuse as well. That's another, but that's more of like an aperitif or a dessert style thing for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I'm just going out with friends and they don't have like a great whiskey selection or something, I'll sip on Blanco tequila.
Awesome. Well, good choices, man. I definitely respect it. And I love once again, I love the collection. So
Thanks.
Travis, as we close out, where can people find you, Ardbeg, social media, whatever you'd like to share with everyone, and any exciting upcoming events that you want to make sure people are a part of?
Yeah. So you can find me on Facebook or Instagram. My Instagram handle is TEEE_RAVIS. So T Ravis. You can find me there, or Travis Tidwell on Facebook. There's not too many of us. I'm hugging a whiskey barrel, I think, so that's a good indicator that you've got the right Travis Tidwell. There is ironically a country music artist who has an Instagram called Travis Tidwell.
Okay.
And yeah, he reached out to me one time because I was posting some events with my name, and so that's kind of funny. There's two of us. I'm the whiskey ambassador, Travis Tidwell.
He's a country star.
Not the country singer. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you can find me there. I'm going to be hosting some Burns supper events. So in honor of Robbie Burns, or Robert Burns, the poet from Scotland. Burns supper typically happens on January 25th. So I'll be going to McMinnville, Oregon to host a dinner there. And then I'll be off to San Antonio to host one on the 27th. So
awesome, man. Well,
but you'll see me throughout with the Can't Untaste It tour. I'll be traveling to a lot of the different markets and hosting events and things like that with that. So
awesome. Yeah. I'm looking forward to becoming part of the committee and tracking and kind of keeping track of that, and maybe being part of a future event. So for everyone at home, make sure that you subscribe if you enjoy what we're doing. And please make sure that you keep an eye on our social media, because I'm going to make those daiquiris and those cocktails that he recommended. We'll record them and we'll try them in real time, as well as I still have one bottle I want to share with some of my friends for our upcoming episode featuring some teachers and going through just our normal episodes. So definitely, Travis, thank you for coming on the show. Make sure everyone at home drinks responsibly. Try something new. I did today, and it was fantastic. Subscribe, share, and see you guys next week. Bye, everyone. Hey, guys. Today's episode was brought to you by Burn, Termite, and Pest Control. I first met Joe Byrne on Full Frontal Nerdity Show and decided to give his company a try. They have been the best pest service I've ever had. From flexible scheduling, attention to detail, fair pricing, and everything you love about a small business, I highly recommend Joe Byrne and Burn, Termite, and Pest Control. It's a family-owned and operated business with over 30 years of experience in termite and pest. You can reach Burn, Termite, and Pest Control at 321-297-7985. Once again, 321-297-7985. And let them know Bourbon and Bullshit sent you. Thanks, guys. See you next time.